Hey guys, and welcome to Should You Buy It, where all we do is talk a little bit about the game and tell you whether or not we think it's worth the cost.
The forces unleashed will shape a new age of wonders.
In this episode, we'll be playing Age of Wonders 4, the fantasy 4X strategy game where you can play anything you want within the fantasy genre, such as industrialized dwarves or angelic ratmen. Now, the first question we always cover in these videos is what stage of development is the game in? And in this case, in Age of Wonders 4, it is currently in full release and available on PC as well as most consoles for $50. Now, if you guys want to save money on games, you should check out Humble Bundle in the description below. Humble Bundle will not only help to give you a discount on games sometimes, but will also help charity and support this channel. Everything you purchase on Humble Bundle will go towards helping a charity, helping our channel, and giving you some kind of a discount if there's a discount running on that game, which they have tons of discounts that Steam does not all the time. And again, if you want to save money, just check out Humble Bundle down below by clicking the link. So what exactly is the game? Well, Age of Wonders 4 is first and foremost an in-depth strategy game with tons of faction customization, city building mechanics, and a turn-based army combat system. The thing that Age of Wonders 4 is known for most, however, is definitely going to be its in-depth faction building. You see, before each game, you can select one of many different pre-made factions such as feudal lord humans, noble elves, or just about any other stereotypical fantasy trope. The fun part, however, is that you do not have to play these standard factions and can actually build your own. This means that you can be feudal lord ratmen, frogmen that are also close with nature, or even a race of undead humans that are well adapted to the snow environment and I definitely didn't get inspired by some pop culture TV show. The point is if you can think of it, it probably can be made and you can probably play as it. Now, once you're done creating your faction and you're ready to start your game, you'll be playing the game itself in two main ways. These are going to be on the world map and on the battlefield map. The world map is where you'll move your armies, interact with other factions, claim territory, upgrade your cities, recruit troops, unlock faction traits, lay siege to other cities, and much, much more. This is where you're going to be doing your planning and your strategic thinking for how you want to structure your army to give you the best chance of winning any combat that you might engage with. For an example, you could focus on building a ton of weak units early on that you can use to rush down your opponents. This, however, would give you the disadvantage of not having a strong army in the late game, so you'd be trying to win very early. Once you do enter combat though, you'll be primarily doing it on the battle map. The battle map is where that turn-based combat system starts to come in. You'll be dropped into a scenario where your army is fighting another of some kind, and the terrain is heavily based on where you were standing on that world map. So for an example, if you're fighting on a water tile, everyone will be in ships, and if you're standing on a giant tree tile, you may be fighting with inside that giant tree. You'll then take turns using your units, followed by your opponent doing the same. It may be as simple as 1 or 2 swordman units fighting it out, or as complex as 18 different units from a wide variety of races on each faction fighting together. This means that it can get very complex very quickly. Each one of your units will fall into one of a few different categories, with those being things like heroes, spearmen, support, range, defensive, and mages. There are of course some more things here, but these are the main primary ones you're going to be seeing. Each of those categories is also designed to play a specific role within your army. For an example, mages have high DPS output and can cause negative effects to your opponents, while spearmen get the first strike ability, allowing them to always get a hit in before they are attacked themselves. Then, based on their tier, faction, and enchantments or other spells being used on that unit, they may have additional functionality or abilities they can use, such as being able to heal themselves if they are blessed by Gaia units, which is a race modification you can do within the game. If I had to put combat into simple terms, just imagine that you're playing tabletop Dungeons & Dragons, where you'll have turn-based combat, but each unit is one player with a simplified set of mechanics and a lot of randomness taken out. If you haven't played Dungeons & Dragons, just know that this is a turn-based combat system where you'll have action points to do different things with your units, such as move them, attack, defend, heal, or debuff your opponents in many different ways. Alrighty, now let's move over to the pros and cons section of the video. First up for the pros is the world map. It feels like a nice blend of the Total War games and the Civilization games kind of put together in this happy medium area. If you haven't played those games before though, just know that it is a really solid system with plenty of depth, but not so much depth that it overwhelms the player and makes things feel like it's too confusing. Next is the variety of ways that you can play and build your faction. I mean, everything from customizing the way your faction and race looks to being able to modify them to have different traits and abilities as you play throughout the game makes the game feel so much more immersive and so much more enjoyable. I can't tell you how cool it is that you can choose to go down a frost tree where you get immune to frost magic and you get extra frost damage and you do better in snow tiles, to being able to also create an undead army while also making them a demonic army if you find the right ancient wonder to do so. The game really tries to encourage you to just go and imagine and create whatever you think sounds like a cool idea and ignore the whole fantasy tropes so that you can have fun playing the game the way that you want to play it. After that is that the game was shipped with few to no bugs at all. In my personal time with the game, I never noticed a single one, and that is a rare sight to behold in this day and age. Unfortunately, games nowadays are just launched riddled with bugs and issues and balance problems, but in Age of Wonders 4, I actually found that not to be an issue whatsoever. Everything felt like it worked. Everything felt like it was decently balanced, even if it wasn't perfect, and therefore I think that's something that deserves to be praised when we're talking about a world where we have AAA titles shipping for $70 that are still incomplete and missing major mechanics and extremely buggy to the point where they're almost unplayable. I think that this is something that has to be mentioned. Next is that the game offers a small progression system for the player to enjoy. This isn't really anything crazy, but it does allow you to go and unlock some new cosmetics, as well as new starting weapons for your heroes, and even some new traits that you can give to your races. Again, it's nothing crazy, but it gives you something to work towards if you want to keep playing the game, so that you feel like every game you play isn't just throwing it away, but actually giving you progress towards something meaningful. And following that one is that the game length is just perfect. To me, this kind of strategy game should take no more than 10 hours and no less than 2 hours, and it seems like they've hit the nail on the head here. Whether you're playing the story and there's only a couple of other NPCs, or you're playing your own custom world with 9 other NPCs in the game is set up in such a way that it should never take you more than 10 hours to complete the entire game, nor should it take you less than 2 hours to complete one with only a few other NPCs to fight. I think this is perfect, as most modern gamers nowadays do not have 30 to 40 hours to sink into a game of Civilization or Stellaris, and therefore it plays out perfectly. And finally is that the turn-based combat system seems to be lightly inspired by D&D combat, which is absolutely wonderful to see and I think should be adapted into many more turn-based combat systems. There's a reason that the D&D combat system has been around so long and done so well, and a big portion of that is just because it's set up in such a way that it's easy to understand once you know the basics of how it works, but also in depth enough for you to really enjoy the game, and they have hit the nail on the head here by implementing that style of a system, but making it appropriate for the game that they're trying to sell. Alrighty, now let's go ahead and move over to the cons. First up for the cons is that the story felt a bit lackluster. Now, this is arguably not that big of a deal to some people, and I totally understand that, but the previous Age of Wonders titles did have a bit more of a story to it, as the way the story's told in this game is by saying, hey, here's a story plot for you with some cool looking cutscenes. It's going to take maybe about 2 minutes for you to read, and then I'm going to drop you into this world where you have to now play out that scenario I just told you about. And that's pretty much it. It's cool to know about, it's fun to play, it creates some unique situations, but there's no set walkthrough, and there's only seems to be a few story missions, which you'll blow through in about 15 to 20 hours if you're playing the game at a decent pace. And finally is that being a specific race basically means nothing right now, at least other than for your cosmetics, since you can change the traits of any race to any other race. For an example, Ratmen you would think would be good in high numbers, but you can decide to play orcs with that same trait if you want to. It's cool that you can do it, but I think it would be nice to have each race have one very tiny passive trait that only that race has, so when you see that somebody's playing, say, an elf, you know, okay, elves have good magical power, they get a bonus like +5 to their mana every turn or something like that, and that would be a cool way to add a little bit of flavor to them without making it feel overpowered or that you have to play a specific race in order to play this certain way. So now it's time for the rating for the game, and when we rate games, we want to get 1 hour of enjoyment out of every $1 that the game costs. So for this game in particular, in Age of Wonders 4, we would want to get roughly 50 hours of enjoyment out of the $50 cost of the game. And after putting several played hours into Age of Wonders 4, we give it 8 out of 10 potatoes. Age of Wonders 4 was probably the best strategy game that I've personally played this year, and as someone who enjoys games like Civ, Total War, and StarCraft, I can confidently say that everything from the combat to the game length seems to be almost perfectly set up for how this game plays. Unfortunately, nowadays, AAA titles just seem to have a ton of bugs and have this uncompleted nature attached to them. Fortunately though, Age of Wonders 4 does not fall into that category, and therefore I can confidently say that Age of Wonders 4 is definitely worth the cost. Before you guys go, I do want to give you a quick thank you for watching the video. Like it if you liked it, dislike if you didn't, and share if you've got some friends that might be interested. Either way, I want to give a big shout out to our Platinum and Above channel members, which currently include Caustic FPV, Jonathan S, Gerald89, AZ Blackbird, and Jim Phillips. Thank you all so much for watching once again. I'm Game Advisor, and I'll see you in the next one.